I'm McKenna.
Hey, I'm Josh. Welcome to Second Lab. We're going to be talking about something that's often considered taboo, right?
A little bit, yeah.
What is that?
Periods.
Periods. Now, I don't experience those, and sometimes it's hard for me to empathize with that. Often I try to empathize, but I don't fully understand what that's like. So today we're going to be talking about a little bit of that. And I know that my audience is 70% male and like 30% female. And if you're a person who doesn't experience periods, you should still watch this video because you might climb with a bunch of people who do experience that. So enough of me talking.
Hey, you ready to talk periods, bud? He's a boy, he doesn't have a period. If you've had a similar education experience as me, then what you've been taught about periods is pretty bare bone. That you bleed once a month for about a week, and then after that, at some point, there's an ovulation period, and that's when the baby danger zone happens, and then it repeats. That's pretty much it though. It wasn't until at my big age of 25, when I started picking up weight training and then eventually climbing, that I started to actually look more into what was actually happening as far as the science of what was going on in that cycle. And that's when I learned that there is something far more complex and nuanced happening within my body every single month, and I had no idea. I want to briefly talk about what I've learned about the menstrual cycle, the implications that those things have on training, and on some of the key takeaways of those implications when it comes to climbing specifically. Now, before we go any further, I do think it's important to note that the research data in this field is still incredibly young. It's a sad reality that the number of studies that focus on men far outweigh the number of studies that we have that focus on women. The research that we do have on people that menstruate shows that there is a high level of inter-individual variability, which that basically means that what we're going to talk about, a lot of these things are true for some people, but not true for others. Just like periods, most women have them, but many experience them differently. I've known people in my life that they only have their period for like 2 to 3 days, and it's very light and not many symptoms. And I've also known people who have very long and painful periods and a lot more symptoms associated with the menstrual cycle and PMS. And this is going to be true for these other things that we're going to talk about today. These might be applicable to you, or they might not be. I think it's important to try to understand the science of what's actually happening in our body, and then equipped with that knowledge, try to better learn and understand ourselves. All right, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and get into what I learned about my period that I didn't know before. The first thing that I didn't know about my body is that there are actually several different phases to the menstrual cycle, not just bleeding or the absence of bleeding. In fact, we can break down our menstrual cycle into 4 distinct phases, and our hormone levels can vary wildly throughout these phases. Contrast this to men who experience fluctuations in their testosterone level throughout the day, but on the whole, they maintain a pretty consistent level of that hormone day by day. That brings me to the second thing that I didn't know about my body, which is just how much these hormones affect our lives, not just our cravings for chocolate or general irritability. This might be common sense to some, but I didn't know just how far-reaching these hormones were as far as functions in our body and how they impact us throughout our entire cycle, not just during the period. According to Dr. Ellen Casey, who is the co-director of the Penn Center for the Female Athlete, the bottom line is that hormonal shifts that drive the menstrual cycle can affect multiple parts of the body, including muscle, bone, endurance, energy level, and attention. Pain levels and pain perception can also change across the menstrual cycle, which may affect performance for some women. Okay, so we know then that these hormone levels can change throughout the cycle and that can have an impact on our body. But let's look a little bit closer then at each of these phases. The menstrual cycle overall can be broken down into two separate phases, the follicular and the luteal. And within each of these phases, you can break them down into two subphases. We start with the follicular phase, which begins with the menstrual phase, which is day 1 of your period. This early phase of the follicular phase is marked by low levels of estrogen and progesterone. This is about the lowest that our hormone levels will be during the cycle. So with such a low level of estrogen, what does that actually mean for our bodies? Research has shown that estrogen levels can impact our VO2 max. And so when we have these lower levels of estrogen during our menstrual phase, our oxygen circulation is actually less effective, making it a little bit more difficult possibly to do things like anaerobic exercises, cardio, endurance. Estrogen also has a major role in muscle regulation, which means that when those estrogen levels are low during our period, your muscles can feel weaker and your muscle soreness can actually be more intense. That kind of goes into the next point, which is that pain sensitivity can actually be increased during this phase as well. I can attest to that from my own personal experience. I'm particularly prone to headaches when I'm on my period, and so when we are bouldering, I have noticed that if I go ahead and take falls from the top of the wall, even though I'm falling on a cushy mat, that impact can cause an immediate splitting headache that I have to sit through for like 2 to 3 minutes before it kind of starts to ease and I can get back into climbing. Knowing this about myself, I've had to kind of make some adjustments when it comes to how I climb when I'm on my period. So one way I've had to adjust is that when I am on my period, that I'm not taking those falls from the top of the bouldering wall. Maybe I'm making sure that we're just doing top roping and I'm not gonna take falls at all, or I'm down climbing when I can, or even just working on projects where the cruxy parts for me are near the bottom of the wall and I'm not having to risk taking those falls that cause that pain splitting or that head splitting head. What's that? Oh, sorry, Yoshi. What is our term? Head splitting headache? That doesn't sound right. Anyways, making sure that I'm not taking those falls that do cause that headache as soon as I drop. So that's just the first half of the follicular phase. After that, we have the rest of the follicular phase, which lasts from the last day of your period up until ovulation, which for most people occurs between 14 to 17 days. During this period, we see rising levels of both progesterone and estrogen until they peak right about at ovulation. So as we have seen that when the estrogen is low, our VO2 max and our muscle strength is lower. It follows then that those things are higher during this time when our hormone levels are back on the incline. We also see that our recovery tends to be a little bit faster and more effective during this time. People that advocate for cycle syncing, your training, say that this is the best time to be going for high intensity workouts or real heavy weightlifting and go get those PRs, go get those sends, you know. And then after that, we move into the luteal phase, which is the second half of your cycle. So after ovulation, we see that estrogen kind of start to drop off again a little bit. And so we start to feel those same symptoms a little bit less intensely as we do during the menstrual phase, but still experience more of that lack of energy, lack of effective oxygen circulation, lack of perceived strength. I think very interestingly, research has shown that during this phase, women actually have a higher resting metabolic rate, which just means that our daily average energy expenditure, or calories we expend just by existing, actually goes up anywhere from like 90 to a little bit over 200 calories per day. This coincides with other research that has shown that women's body weights are at their lowest during this phase. Other studies have shown that women are more likely to experience cravings during this time too. which makes sense if, our body is expending more energy just by existing, that perhaps our brains would be craving more food, higher calorie foods. Yoshi, are you always in your luteal phase? Are you always craving some food? He's always craving them snacks. Yeah. There was a very interesting study that looked at the brain activity of women when looking at higher calorie foods, and the brain activity was higher during that luteal phase as opposed to the follicular phase, meaning that the response to the high calorie food was stronger during this phase. Also during this phase, we see progesterone, the other hormone that we've been talking about, actually peak at its highest. According to Dr. Retnavalu, the mid-luteal stage is when we may feel the most tired. This is because progesterone levels in the body are at their highest, and progesterone can leave the body feeling tired, quicker to exhaust, and more likely to overheat. And then finally, we see both those hormone levels kind of drop again until we reach the very end of the cycle, which begins the next cycle, where those levels are low again at the beginning of the next period. Okay, so now that we have a better understanding of the menstrual cycle and our hormone impacts on our bodies, what does this mean? Well, firstly, it goes without saying that despite constantly fluctuating hormone levels, women kick
Scarpa.
7 days a week, 365 days of the year. There are times where we have to grit our teeth a little bit harder and feel like we have to put more energy into doing what we know ourselves capable of doing, but we do it anyways. And we do this every single month. And women do crush regardless every single month. Secondly, equipped with all this knowledge, we can embark on a journey to better learn our own body's unique rhythms and beats, and better understand ourselves and how to take care of ourselves. You can use a cycle tracker or a period journal to track how your body feels at each stage of this cycle and try to better learn what your body needs. Whether that looks like being more intentional about recovery during your menstrual phase, or if you're like me and prone to headaches and pain on your period, being much more careful about down climbing and avoiding falls. Maybe that looks like making sure to bring some extra good snacks to the crag during your luteal phase, or maybe that looks like going for those crazy sins when you're feeling strong and feeling energized. Or maybe it just looks like being more gentle and compassionate with yourself. This has been such an important journey of learning for me. I'm a deeply competitive person by nature, and so it has been very easy in the past for me to fall into frustration and into negative self-talk when I feel like I'm not performing as well as I think I should be able to. A better understanding of my body and the natural cycles it goes through has helped me gain a deeper appreciation for everything it does rather than falling into these toxic headspaces. How we feel and our perception of our own strength and our own progress is not always going to be linear, and that's okay. I hope some of this information helped you, whether that's by learning something about yourself or just learning more about the science of the human body in general. Whether you're a person who menstruates or not, listen to your body and be kind to yourself. Say bye, Yoshi. Say bye-bye, Yoshimaru. What a good boy. Did you learn about the menstrual cycle? Yeah? Yeah? Yoshi? Yeah, you learned something. You're such a smart boy. Peace.